Well, welcome everybody to the QCast. This is the weekend edition. And today I'm going to talk about practical preparedness and dealing with the nuclear issues. 90% of all the headlines now dealing with North Korea, China, Russia, dealing with the meltdown in reactors, the ongoing extinction level event from Fukushima. And one said the first four letters of that pretty much give the globalists in the New World Order your middle finger salute without being tacky. That's the only way I can say it. The number one and primary important goal in dealing with nuclear issues is understanding radiation, understanding things like halving layers, protection, how to monitor your environment. How will you know if the internet goes down and everything goes out? How will you know what to do? How will you know what the radiation readings are? I want to share something with you, and this stuff will be available on my website probably by next week, but you can just send me an email, steve777@stevequail.com. I'm personally carrying this with me at all times now. I've got probably 10 different radiation monitors, but this one is kind of cool. It's just about, same size as an iPhone, about half the size. And what this is it's a radiation detector and a nitrate tester, and it's called the Food Eco Tester. Now, the reason I like this is because you can pull off the case and it's got a probe. Let's say you got a can of tuna and you want to know, or you buy some fresh seafood. You basically press the button that's on the front of this, put it in there, and it will show you, first of all, if there's a bunch of nitrates, i.e. preservatives in the food, and it has as a scale, it tells you don't eat it. It's very blunt. And it has a list of different fruits and meats and vegetables that you can check specifically. So the database is filled automatically. I'm sorry, I can't make it any clearer than that. And this will be up on my website. My friends from Antarctica, the guys that have been kind of keeping me in the loop, are letting me know what's going on down there. And they said, you got to take a look at this meter, Steve, because it provides the fastest readings of any meter on the market. The one I'm going to show you next and what we'll put up on the screen for you will help you understand it. But briefly, this is accurate down to the microsieverts. And it's a personal radiation monitor, so it acts kind of as a dosimeter, but it also acts as the reference tool that will tell you if you're moving into a hot zone, meaning where the radiation is greater, or moving away from a hot zone, which means the radiation is lesser. It's really important that people get the idea and get the instrument in order to be able to monitor their environment. Now look, I don't know what's going to happen, whether it's going to be a dirty bomb first or an attempted launch. But right now, we're getting so much radiation in the upper atmosphere. We're getting it on the West Coast. We're getting it all up and down the Western Hemisphere, at least our West Pacific Ocean. That stuff, there are different places. There are hot zones all over the country, all over the world now. And compared to even Chernobyl, the issue with Fukushima is becoming more and more dire every day. We've had a situation at one of the Florida nuclear plants, an emergency shutdown. If you notice, ladies and gentlemen, we've had, I think we're going either 3 for 3 or 4 for 4 because we have the situation in India also. So the nuclear issues, here's what people have got to understand. The global winds, if you will, take radiation in one area and deposit in the other. The idea that somehow we're all going to basically just be able to tip-throw to the tulips without having to deal with any radiation feedback is just profoundly stupid. And in this case, it'd be dumb unto death. I want to once again refer to you to a book. My inbox is filling up right now. My inbox is filling up with what do I do? What do I do? I get it. The very first thing you need to know is that you've still got time to prepare, okay? It's not too late. But the most important thing you have going for you in your preparedness is the understanding of what you got to deal with. Holly Dale in her book, Dare to Prepare, and I've said this before, this is like probably the encyclopedia of practical preparation. I was a publisher of even a 2-volume set, but I got to be blunt. There is nothing like this. There's nothing better. You can't get more information in one source. So for 630 pages, she starts at page 444 and goes into great detail on the effects of nuclear radiation. I want to read just these titles to the chapters because I don't think most people have any idea of what a nuclear emergency is. Number 2, they don't have any idea how to protect themselves if they want to. What are the effects of nuclear detonations? How do energetic nuclear particles even act and react? What are fallout maps? What's the blast radius? All these different questions that people need to have a basic understanding of, they don't. You can't run inside in a wood-roofed home and think you've got it. It's safe. If you remember the early nuclear tests that went on during the development of the atom and hydrogen bombs in America's and other countries' nuclear testing, it used to be, explode a bomb in the atmosphere for lunchtime until those who were nuclear powers at that time, came to a statement that they would only move to underground nuclear testing. But given the fact now that we're dealing with really, really in-your-face radioactivity, see, during the Cold War, whether you ducked under your desk during your civil defense training periods in school, whether you basically were in the military, you trained, no matter how you trained, where you trained at your age, it was always in the future that this could be a what if. It no longer is a what if. It is a what it is. It is what it is. And I'm not trying to be clever with that statement, but we now have more deleterious and dangerous levels of radioactive isotopes, in other words, energetic particles that are dangerous and deadly to human flesh. Obviously, the sea life is dying in the Pacific. And contrary to what the naysayers, said 4 years ago, now they don't have to eat cake, as Marie Antoinette said, but let them eat beach sand. Oh, and by the way, it's radioactive. The idea of being in control means you've got to have information to base your actions on. And the more you understand all of the issues associated with nuclear radiation and shielding and protection and water purification and air purification and how to monitor, how to measure, all these go into your, if you will, your general processing bank of being prepared ahead of time. In any detonation or any dissemination of nuclear particles, obviously as the time increases, the lethality of the particles decrease proportionately. So in essence, 24 hours later, you're going to have less radiation than you did the previous 24 hours. But sheltering during nuclear emergencies, there are what are called expedient ways to even go into a basement and make the best do of very little to work with. This is not the billionaire bunkers where you got to decide how to keep your water temperature at body temperature and how to process. I mean, most people can't live that way. But most people in America can either go together and one person you can, and this is almost an impossibility unless God brings them across your path, sync up and link up with like-minded people. And let me share something that I've learned, and I guess I have some foresight in this and some history. Never, ever, 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 never, ever, ever sync up or link up with someone who basically has done nothing on their own to prepare. I had a guy come through to my store once, a couple years ago. He says, "Yeah, I'm a prepper." I said, "Well, what kind of food do you have?" "Well, I got a week's worth of food." I said, "What kind of water do you have stored?" "Well, I don't. I got this little filter here," and he showed me a filter straw, but he was a prepper. Well, I'm telling you point blank, he wasn't. And even the law enforcement community has their emergency bags, if you want, bug out bags. I call them LAD bags, live another day. a lot of people are going to be caught literally off guard. And I don't want one viewer of this QCast to be in that. So we're talking about the book by Holly Dale, Dare to Prepare. And you can go buy, 10 different books, or you can buy this one. And again, as I wrote my own survival book years and years ago, before I met Holly and Stan Deyo. But the thing that's interesting is, I got to tell you this, nuclear war survival skills, surviving doomsday, life after doomsday. I mean, I used to sell them all. I read them all. But even to the degree you focus on the nuclear issue, you've got to deal with all the other issues like sanitation. You've got to deal with the issues of food preparation. You've got to know, are there expedient shelters that I can locate? For instance, is there an abandoned train tunnel, that isn't filled with rattlesnakes and other people that have made it there before you did? The thing is that there are specific areas in buildings, parking garages, and knowing the direction from which the radiation is approaching, obviously, even by that, you can offset specific corners will be less hot, meaning they'll have less radiation than the more hot ones. Well, this cool little meter here, and again, it's a radiation meter. It's also a nitrate detector. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the scientists in Antarctica, and I didn't know this company existed. So again, this is one of the best detectors on the market. And I would encourage you all to send me an email if you want one of these. If you want to buy one, I'll have the information up on my website by next Monday, if I can get my webmaster to work over the weekend. The reason this is critical is because today, I was going to hold off and do this until it was on my website, blah, blah, blah. But when I saw the lousy excuse for what's happening in Florida and the potential for now what's called gray terror to be put into place. Gray terror simply means that there's going to be a lot of events that are being initiated by America's enemies that will be blamed on equipment malfunction. You can bet your bottom dollar, you can bet your last silver dollar that whatever is happening, you will never be told the truth. That is the prime directive of the globalists. With surprise, this is their equation, comes maximum destruction. With surprise comes maximum destruction. That's always been true in war. It's kind of like he who throws the first punch usually wins. Well, in the nuclear arena, that may be true also, because if you remember United States posture under Bill Clinton, we would not launch on another nation launching on us. We would receive the launch. And in other words, we'd take the hit and then decide what we're going to do. Thank God the former entity in the place on Pennsylvania Avenue is no longer there. Thank God that at least President Donald Trump understands what's at stake. Now, obviously, if you want World War III and you want everybody dead, then he's not your right guy. But I want to put something into perspective here. I'm going to take a little segue, and that's how I do it. Does it surprise everybody that they're fighting over the issue of was President Trump bugged? Absolutely. We covered that in the previous QCast. What about 1 million classified emails leaked? What about at least 300,000 being national security issues leaked on Hillary Clinton's servers? What about an abject contempt for national security by the former Secretary of State? Does anybody else get this? I pray they do. I'm sure they do. But you understand what's happened here? The focus of treason by the former Secretary of State, the issue of shaking down foreign governments for personal gain, i.e. the Clinton Foundation, is secondary now to just arguing over, well, who gave the order to, I think we know the answer to this one, to wiretap and basically electronically eavesdrop on President-elect Donald Trump, now president. We're seeing a time where the narrative is changing. And what makes you think, if there's an intercept of a North Korean ballistic missile, nuclear ballistic missile, and there's great harm coming in the way of a radiation cloud, you'll ever know about it? What makes you think that? What makes you think anyone's going to come to your rescue? Let me give you a hint, they're not. What makes you think that anybody's going to care about you and your well-being and your family's well-being when they got their own well-being and their own family to care about? If you do not care now, you will be put into a caretaker facility, provided you get to live, or you'll be taken care of. Either one of those have a permanent sound to me. So basically, Holly goes in, and this is on page 459. I'm saying this. I will quote her title, but I dare you to prepare. I dare you to take the time to order the book on my website, stevequayle.com, go into the books, but see what is required. Do you even have enough plastic bags that if you had to use as waste bags with a 5-gallon bucket and a toilet seat, and then had the chemicals that you could dump in immediately so you wouldn't have to worry about any smell? Because remember this, whenever you have human waste that isn't dealt with, you get vermin, you get flies. When you get flies, you get vermin, not only the smell, then you get the associated medical conditions, dysentery, etc., and it can go from there really quick. Flies breeding, especially insects breeding now, genetically engineered and altered insects, this is stuff you got to think about. You know, the idea is simply this, that there are so many places, what are called expedient shelter sites, and that's again on page 459. Home shelter. What Holly's done is reproduce the civil defense shelter plans, and you can do this really easy. When I say really easy, relatively easy and relatively cheap. You know, there are ways to incorporate into your landscaping design functional shelter plans. And this isn't a redo. This isn't a redo of the 60s, ladies and gentlemen. This is basically, we're in a whole different world now. We're in a totally different world. And lists of materials. People always ask me, what about shipping containers? You know, there's a bunch of guys in Bozeman, Montana and Livingston, Montana that are probably built more shelters than anybody in the world. But if you're using shipping containers, you have to take into effect earth arching, and you've got to make almost an exoskeleton, and you've got to use dead men. Obviously, if you've got a horizontal structure going into a wall, you've got to obviously be able to take all of the pressure so that it doesn't, when you grab a can and squish it, that doesn't happen to your shipping container. So you've got to reinforce the ceilings. You've got to reinforce the walls. Those are issues that you can deal with. And in this, I'm just paging through the book right now. Nuclear and radiological attack. You know, what's the difference between a dirty bomb? Well, a dirty bomb, you're dealing with basically radioactive materials and, if you will, isotopes wrapped around a conventional explosive. The difference between that is a nuclear bomb is either using fission or fusion. And that's not even to mention some of the other high-tech weapons. But here's the primary point I'm trying to make today. You need to be able to monitor your personal exposure to radiation. You need to know where you go. You need to understand what meter you need to acquire. For instance, the one you'll see on the screen in a minute, it's Dosimeter Prime. Kind of cool, kind of like Optimus Prime. But it's the newest and fastest professional radiation detector that exists. I mean, 1 second readings, okay? 1 second readings. It's very cool. And as you'll see, the different kind of like VU display, it will show you the area that's safe. In other words, you have a threshold. Today in Bozeman, Montana, I think I'm at 15. I'll do this right now for you. I'll have this in a moment. I'm analyzing. Okay, right now I'm analyzing and running it. And let's see, we're at 0.14. It's got a little green light flashing. Let's see if I can show you this. Okay. Yeah, I apologize for the lighting in here. Okay, now we're at 1.5, but still normal background radiation. I think this is more important than your cell phone. Okay, this will end up saving your life. The cell phone will end up to be a tracking device that ends up, for those who are high value targets, taking your life. So again, if you're interested, send me an email, steve777@stevequayle.com. This will be up on my website Monday, Tuesday of next week. But this is a prime prime example of what you must have. And the other one, the one I'm talking about, the Dosimeter Prime, it comes to about this. It's even smaller. It is as small as a cell phone, and it's even narrower than a cell phone. 3 buttons. I love it. It's really easy. 3 buttons. Now, back to what concerns me today. What concerns me today is the fact that more and more nuclear power plants seem to be coming under attack. So you talk about a dirty bomb. When you've got a conventional nuclear power plant, and we're not even talking Fukushima now, we're talking the ones that are still intact worldwide, coming under attack by whatever form of military ordnance that can blow stuff up, you're dealing with some very potentially dangerous targets. Number one, the idea is simply this. Know everything you can know about the subject matter, because even if you don't have money, your valuable knowledge, this is how some of you can become, if you will, your best asset by knowing what's going on. I'll make a point. You've got a bunch of people standing around. You've just heard. You go out and you've just heard, and people are coming out of their houses. They're looking for someone to tell them what's on. Everybody looks, the neighborhood's dark or there's no power in the neighborhood. People start to come out, 1 or 2, to see if anybody might have that most important asset during a time like this information. Because again, ladies and gentlemen, even basic weather understanding, telling you the things like what are your average winds in the month of March in Bozeman, Montana, or wherever you live, and typically where do they come out of, the north, out of the west. But you having the information, when you start to know what you're talking about, their number one priority will be to keep you alive. Same thing for doctors and nurses and people in the medical field. Emergency techs, anybody that knows how to take care of people that are hurting, wounded, or dying. So in this QCast, I'm trying to get you to see one thing. The events that used to be relegated to the future during the 60s are no longer the future in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Now we're living with one of the greatest, and I believe this, not natural disaster-oriented meltdowns of Fukushima, but one of the most initiated extinction-level events that's ever taken place at the hand of man. By the way, they're using neutron flux, talking about stuff that's going on in different reactors in India. They're talking about neutron flux used to be even a Star Wars term, and they used to deny it. But now what's interesting, it's even coming into, a Star Trek term before it was a Star Wars term. The common vernacular is, how should I say this, almost being thrust into a science fiction dictionary. So what a lot of people don't understand is this, that the least that you expose yourself or as you are exposed less to the radioactive source, fallout, whatever, you're going to have a greater opportunity for your body's natural defense to fight off all the attendant diseases that are going to follow. So in this book, and I got to tell you something, seriously, consider this not a sales pitch. Consider this a pitch for your life, okay? This is the singular most informative volume of information on how to prepare for everything that's coming our way. Feast or famine, nuclear, biological, chemical, the idea, how to make soap. Okay, I'm just going to page through this. I love this. I'm going random on you right now, like I don't usually. Candle making, okay? Building fires, all the different ways to build fires, keeping food safe in an emergency, composting, growing your own food. Man, she goes into dehydrating, freeze drying, everything that you can, the calorie count, the times it takes here's one, okay? I wouldn't have known this. Artichokes. It's going to take between blanching them, it's going to take about 6 to 8 minutes. Drying about 2 to 3 days. So, stuff like this, it's critical. Chilies, how to raise chilies. generators, all the different types of generators, all the types of different stoves that are available, okay? One of the things I like about this book the most is that it's one of the most highly illustrative books. I, for one, when I was on talk radio circuit beginning, I kept telling people, don't talk it, show it. Don't define it, illustrate it. Don't try and say you got a little thing that goes on a little thing that goes on a little thing. You plug this deal in and turn this. For those of us that don't follow instructions, that doesn't help. Everything that you can imagine is in this book, Dare to Prepare. Barbecues. How long will your 5-gallon container of propane last? How many minutes? The 5s, the 11s, the 20s, the 30s, and the 40-pound propane containers. Page 331. All of the different issues that you've got to deal with. See, everything is ancillary. How do solar cookers work? Communications. More people will basically flip out and miss out because they're not going to have thought about communications. And believe me, when I talk about communications, I'm talking about the days where you might go back to have to figure out what a solar mirror is and how to work it. You might need to understand that if it relies on power, it's probably not going to work unless it's battery power. And if there's been an electromagnetic pulse, you better make sure that your personal family radios or your shortwaves or whatever have been placed in a Faraday cage. You better understand that there's a whole lot of issues to deal with. One of the most important devices that you can physically get is a shortwave radio. A good shortwave radio, my definition of good shortwave radio, is going to have to cost between $200 and $300, or it's not going to be any good. There's names out there. You can go on, do an internet search on the best shortwave radio. Go on ham magazines, and look up the guys that use them. If there's a ham fest, HAM, a shortwave group that meets, go and listen in. Most of those guys I found are amazing, and ladies, they're more than willing to share. As we talk about radiation, as we're talking about the times we now live in, I want people to know that your number one criteria when it comes to food is going to be health. It's going to be healthy food. You see, it's not enough to have rice and beans because vitamin C is really critical. You're going to need vitamin D as in delta. You're going to need vitamin E as in echo. No matter what the AMA or the FDA or the, all the other CDC tells you, listen, mariners knew that they needed to have citrus or they would end up with scurvy and rickets. So one of the companies that's been with me for a long time, and I just want to give them a pitch, because they make a wonderful, wonderful drink called Cocoa Mojo. Cocoa Mojo is basically cocoa with coconut milk in it, and the coconut milk and the cocoa combined basically gives you the benefit of caprylic and lauric acid. The products they make are second to none. Their NutriCafe is the coffee that a lot of people love. And here's why they love it, is because it basically tastes good, but also they put natural supplements in it to help you. Everything they do at Inner Health Botanicals is designed to keep you in the best of health. Inner Food is an amazing thing. There's no gimmicks behind the product. It's a green powder that's so nutrient dense and nutrient rich, and it's called Inner Food. They've vacuum sealed everything now for longer life. So I want you to know that I have been with this company, and forgive me, we've been together for at least 20 years, I think. They make some of the best herbal tinctures in the world. And what's interesting about herbal tinctures is, remember this, you guys, modern pharmaceuticals send research teams spending billions of dollars around the world looking for natural, some people call them nutraceuticals, and then when they find them and they find out the wonderful, if you will, life-enhancing properties of that plant or of that extract from seaweed or whatever it is, lichens growing at a certain level, then they identify it and then they try and duplicate it, and then they try and patent it so that they can basically make the money off of it. Well, the nice thing about herbal tinctures is that you can basically cover a lot of territory and cover a lot of ground without a prescription or the necessary cost. So I want to share this with you. It's go to enerfood.com. Or you can just click on the banner on my website. Because as someone who even had food companies that produce the food companies, the number one concern is, do they have nutritional integrity? Well, I can tell you this, the folks at Enerfood Botanicals, Enter Health Botanicals, Enter Food, that's one of their food trademarks, is they've spent a lot of decades perfecting and attenuating their products. So, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you this, that again, we have so many clients and people that email me and write me that are giving me fabulous stories. I even told a story about a guy that got run over by literally, you're going to love this, a drunken lawyer just about killed him. But the whole thing that brought him back on death's door was one of his friends brought some Enter food to him, mixed it up, made him an excellent smoothie. But the point is that brought him back because the guy was starving in the hospital. I mean, not only was, broken bones and everything. And oh, by the way, due to the justice system, because she was a very wealthy attorney, nothing ever happened to her. The case was dismissed. She was so far over the legal limit, and yet, nothing happened. This guy was a vet, by the way. So the nice thing about Enerfood is that it's available. They make a 40-day bucket. And without going into everything, just take a look at it. Go and read the testimonials on Enerfood. Read on the website. To finish this out, you can get this book and my book, Weather Wars. I made this statement. We put these together in a special. And the book that surprised me the most, that I think is the most relevant, that I've written, and it's a good book from people who have read it, because at the time I wrote it, there was nothing else out there. Now we've got geoengineeringwatch.org, and we've got chemtrails. We've got so many good, there are good, Chemtrail Planet. There's some really good websites out there. I don't know if Carnicom changed his site, carnicom.com. Just so many good things. But Dane Wigington, thanks for the job you're doing. Obviously, geoengineeringwatch.com. And for those of you that still don't believe in chemtrails, let me give you my worst case scenario. An equilibrium has been established in the atmosphere of, let's just say this, and these are my terms, not their, hodgepodge components, substances, chemicals, and elements that when mixed with another binary agent produce the ultimate, if you will, killer rain, the Black Death. If you think that's so far out, you've got to see that even some of the chemtrail pilots now are coming clean. They're coming out in the open and telling you, look, I can't live with my conscience. For those of you that want to know the real purpose of chemtrails beyond reflecting sun back in the upper atmosphere, etc., please get my book, Xenogenesis, Xenogenesis. Xenogenesis means adding another, if you will, strand of DNA to a double helix, making it a triple helix. And that usually means exogenous to the underlying DNA strand. In other words, it could be anything from an animal. It could be, most likely, what I believe it is obviously the DNA of fallen angels when they mated with earth women. And if you think that's so wacky, why is so much money being spent to combine human and animal DNA? You think they care enough about people that they'll let rot and starve all over the world to make sure that they, don't go deaf? Listen, every altruistic announcement of this type of research and the results has a more sinister purpose in mind. The revelation that's in my book, and I tell people this, the most profound thing I've known in the last 10 years, and thank you, Will, for this, was when a CIA station chief or maybe associate deputy, but high enough to have every clearance necessary, to say the purpose was to basically change the atmosphere, to change the literal response of light, and obviously we're photons, and God said, let there be light, and guess what? We're all here. The thing is that we are dealing now with some sinister wickedness. And over the years, as I've been on talk radio, generals, scientists, you name it, they come through my store doors and they say, just want you to know this. Or people will literally come by sometimes and they'll say, hey, I got a letter from this guy, but he said, please give to Steve Quayle. And sometimes it'll be, obviously I can't tell you my name, but here, look at this, look at that. What I've come to the conclusion, and this is after a lot of years, a lot of wrinkles, bloodshot eyes, long nights, no nights, the percentage of people who really care, who will really stand, who will really care about helping, who will really go out and do it and action, not just sit and mouth it in their words. I'm saying this. I used to think it was 3%. Don't ask me how I arrived at that. 3%. Now I believe it's down to 1%. 1% of the United States population right now makes a pretty small number, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, if we're dealing with, let's just call it quick and dirty, 320 million people, 10% is 3.2 million that get it. 3.2 million people. So I hope I'm wrong. I pray it'd be higher, like 10%. But that means the chances of people that you rub elbows with, that you work with, that you play with, meaning, if you go play golf, you go, race cars together, you go shooting, whatever. If you go shooting, I'd say that they probably are in the 1%. But the point being is that because of those who know have been so selectively isolated, there really aren't that many. And I believe God's going to turn the apple cart upside down. You know why? Because the apples on the surface of the cart look great, but the ones underneath are all rotten to the core. Oh, gee, that brings up another story about core reality, which we won't go to right now. You'll be allowed to play whatever games the games people play. You'll be allowed to be entertained with the entertainment that Hell devised yesterday, scripted a year ago, and then obviously put on the screen. You will be seduced by whatever looks the most desirous to the eyes, sounds the best to the ears, promises you promises that only the devil can make good on until you have to make good on the devil's payback time. The point to rise up, stand up, speak up, act up, that time is diminishing, but you still have time. You still have time. You still have time to dare to prepare. If you don't know at this point in your life why you need to prepare, then my guess is these QCasts for you, for those of you who've taken that attitude, don't watch them. It's a waste of your precious time because your time is better well spent staying up all night and playing games or watching whatever movies you're watching or, sitting on the stupid Faces of Death book. That's what I call it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, please, in closing, most important thing any of you can have is a personal radiation monitor, especially with the breakdown of so many reactors worldwide. This is going to affect you. And you can say, well, I'm out of here. I'm 70, 80, whatever you are. But without having any thought for your children or grandchildren, pretty selfish. I think that the relative minor expense of getting our book special of Dare to Prepare and Weather Wars is beyond price. It's a deal of the century. So again, you can go on this, get my book special, Dare to Prepare, and Weather Wars and Unnatural Disasters, stevequayle.com. And again, this is the weekend edition of the QCast. So please support the Inner Health people and the Inner Food people. These are great guys, and they've got products that simply nobody else has on the market. Thank you. Until next time, bye-bye.